Hey guys, so today we have part 2 of our Worbla basics. Luke started us off with how to use Worbla in his video, and I'll link down below. So whilst I don't have Mr. Triangle, Mr. Square or Mr. Swirl with me, I'm going to go through different techniques on how to detail with Worbla and other materials, adding attachment points and how to prepare it all for painting in the end. So let's get to it. Well, the first thing you'll notice when you come to buy Worbla is that it not only comes in different sizes, but it also comes in different colours. So the original is the brown one, and this has a very smooth surface on one side, and that tends to be the surface that sticks the most to things, and a rougher surface on the other side. You've also got a black one, which has an incredibly shiny surface again, but this surface is a lot smoother. We also have the pearl, and basically as they've grown as a brand and grown their processes, each side has then become smoother again. I've also got some transparent, which is more difficult to work with than the others, but you can get some cool effects with it. So it also comes in red, but I've not actually tried that one yet. There is a mesh one, which is good for creating corset boning or masks. You can basically use it to sew. And they have little crystals similar to the transparent one that you can then heat up and use in moulds to create crystals and that kind of thing. But these are the four that I'll be showing you today. Okay, so as Luke showed you, when it's heated up it goes floppy. The brown, the black and the pearl have a lower melting point, so it's about 80 degrees Celsius, and you just mould it. So that's the brown. There we go. Brown and the black. So you can already see that these two are smoother than that one. So these are the examples. We've got the original, the black and the pearl. Now these all have much lower melting points or working points than the transparent. These are mouldable at about 80 degrees C, whereas this has to be about 120 before it actually moulds correctly. So if you're going to use transparent, your best bet would be to get some heat-proof gloves. On the website they recommend something with a smooth surface so that you don't end up with material prints. This is the best I could get. Is a lot more difficult to work with this one. Even these gloves aren't quite smooth enough not to leave a mark. And it doesn't quite mould to foam the same way, so I have sandwiched it, but it's not stuck. and there are the examples of Worbla. As you can see, the original, the black and the pearl have all bonded to the foam, which is quite normal for Worbla. However, the transparent one, you can't rely on heat alone to bond it to something, so you would need to use either hot glue or contact glue just to keep it in place. You can also create seams and edges with it because it's much more difficult to mould an edge with the transparent Worbla. But as you can see, unfortunately, even those gloves were not quite smooth enough not to leave any marks. So it is more tricky to work with, but it can be done. Those are the types of Worbla. Next I'll go through detailing and using other materials and Worbla together. Thermoplastics like Worbla are very, very versatile. You can use lots of different techniques, you can use it in many different ways. I'm going to go through a few of the basic ones to get you started. I'm starting with a foam base, and then I've got foam to detail. I've got different mediums to detail, so I've got foam clay, I've got string, and I've got foil. And then this one's just going to be plain Worbla with Worbla detailing. So you're going to want to sort of press it into all the crevices and make sure that it sits nice and firmly around them. That is the first one. You can use tools like clay tools or even just a chopstick just to get in the grooves and really press it down. But as you can see, it's got some nice definition, the lines are very crisp. Okay, and that's the second one. So you can see the lines on this are well defined, but they're also a lot smoother, so okay, and there's the second one. As you can see, the lines on this are still well defined, but they are a lot smoother. Detailing Worbla. So don't ever throw away your scraps because you can use them for detailing. So what you can do is you can reheat all these tiny little pieces and you can just mould them together. So you can then use this, make sure it's warm, and then obviously you can heat this up a little bit and it will stick to it. It can take time to get the edges moulded nicely, but if you keep reheating it, you should be able to sort of smooth it out. Okay, and there's the just detailing using Worbla. It can take a while to get some smooth edges, so you do have to keep at it, but you can get some really nice detail, some really nice definition. So those are a couple of methods. And one of the best things about Worbla and thermoplastics in general is it's reusable. It's repeatable, you can remold it. So even if you've rolled it into a little sausage, you can then heat it up and remold it again. One thing I would advise against is rolling it all into a ball, because the thicker the Worbla, the thicker density it is, the longer it's going to take to heat, and you're unlikely to be able to get to that bit in the middle to reheat it. But what you can do is you can heat it all up, get a rolling pin and flatten it into a new piece of Worbla. So it is more brittle than sort of the Worbla you would get on a roll. However, it's perfectly usable as is, and you can cut shapes out of it. You can just heat it up and reuse it again. Now, foam is a very good base. However, it's not the only thing you can use. You can also use things like wire. So for Picket here, I created the frame using garden wire and then moulded the Worbla over it. And that just means he's got a lot of stability. I can pop him in my, I can pop him in Newt's suitcase and he's not going to get too battered or too out of shape. So that is something else you can do with Worbla. Right, well, I said that thermoplastics are a very versatile material, and they really are. You can use it to create attachment points with D-rings and safety pins. You can use split pins to create stud effects. I know Mahal uses googly eyes. You can add eyelets. You can even use contact glue to add Velcro to the back of it so that you can create armour pieces that attach quite easily. So what I'll do is I'll go through a couple of these with you. Okay, so the first one I've got is a D-ring, and I'm going to use the Worbla as a way of attaching it. You can attach it directly to foam if you wrap it. You can also attach it to Worbla. And what you want to do is you just want to wrap it around the foam, press it down well, and then give it a wiggle just to make sure that it can move. Otherwise you're going to find your attachment point won't actually move with you, and it'll be a bit annoying. So you want a bit of wiggle on there. Okay, and then you have a Worbla attachment point. Okay, so the next one is a safety pin. And similar to the D-ring, you can attach it either to foam with a wrapping method, or you can attach it directly to Worbla, because Worbla sticks to itself. So like the D-ring, press it down, make sure it's securely in there, but give it a bit of a wiggle. You want a bit of wiggle room. Safety pin attachment. So the next one I'm going to go through is scoring it. Now, you want to do it whilst the Worbla is still hot, and you can just take some clay tools, or in a pinch you can use something like a chopstick or a knife, and you can just create indents and just score into it. It doesn't matter if the foam shows through a little bit. What matters is when you prime it and paint it, that will be an indent, which you can then use for sort of etching designs, or you could use it as battle damage. So you can do it that way, or the other thing you can do is you can actually use a soldering iron very, very carefully. And where the soldering iron is hot, it will then melt the Worbla around it. so it's not great on camera, but once it's sort of painted and primed, I can show you examples in the end of what that would look like. Okay. Okay, so if you were creating armour or something and you wanted to create metal studs, you could use split pins, or I think they're called paper pins as well, and you then just wobble over the top. So press it down quite firmly, and there you have some studs. You can use anything that's round to create the studs. Some people use things like buttons or googly eyes because they come in a variety of different sizes. I know Mel used that method for Cassandra, and it was certainly a time seeing somebody's armour covered in many, many googly eyes. Your last one is to create eyelets. So I'm going to pop the Worbla on, wrap it around. Okay. Depending on the size of the hole you want, you can use things like hole punches. I have tried. It's a little bit difficult to get it on just because there's no adjusting this one. If you need the hole to be bigger, you can always cut or scalpel it. So I've just heated up around it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the eyelet in to show me where I need to cut, and then from there I can just cut around that. You're better off cutting it a little bit smaller so that the eyelet could be pushed through, because if you make it too big, your eyelet's just going to fall straight through. You push the eyelet through, you add the back, and then you use, with these ones, you have a hammer and a tool that you can then basically crush the back so that it stays together. Okay, so with eyelets, these particular ones, you get the base to sit in there, you get that bit in there, and then you just hammer it down, which I'm not going to do on here. Okay, so now we have attachment points, we have scoring, we have studs, we have eyelets. At the end of the video I'll go through a couple of example pieces just to show you how I've used each in combination, but for now I'm going to go through preparing your piece for painting. As we've seen, there's a lot of different ways to use Worbla. There's also quite a few different ways to prepare it for painting. So some people use PVA glue. We actually prefer wood glue because it's a bit stronger, it's a bit more hard wearing. Some people use something called gesso or gesso, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Some people use spray paint primer, and I used to use an all-purpose paint primer. So I'll go through the glue and the paint with you. I don't actually have any spray paint primer to hand, so I can't show you that, but I've never found that it particularly effective. To use thin layers, try and spread it evenly. But as you can already see the difference in the coverage from the original Worbla, which has a much rougher texture, to the coverage on the smoother black Worbla. So you will need more layers of glue or paint primer on the original Worbla than you would on the black or even the pearl Worbla. So I'll leave them to dry, and I'll do a couple more layers and we'll sort of see how it goes. So we have here the prepared Worbla. So you've got 3 layers each of the glue and the multi-purpose primer. As you can see, the surface of this is more rough, so it's going to take more layers to get it shiny. You'd also need to sand the all-purpose primer down between each layer. So if you're doing something like armour, the black or the pearl gives you a nice sort of sleek surface to work with, which is always ideal if you want to make something that looks metallic. So from here you can then paint it up as you want it, and then you want to finish it off with some kind of sealant, otherwise the paint will chip or scratch quite easily, and you want to protect it. So something like Mod Podge, or even like a clear sealant, and that just keeps the paint where you want it to be, and it means that if you're caught in the rain or anything, you're not going to immediately ruin all your nice paint work. Hopefully these tips have been helpful for you guys. Worbla is a really interesting material to work with, and cosplayers, being a really creative bunch, are always finding new ways to use it, so don't be afraid to just jump in and give it a go. We've reached the end of the video, so I'm going to pop a few examples of things that I've made using these techniques. Feel free to skip it if you want, and we'll see you next time. Bye! Okay, so I'm going to show you some examples of the various techniques I've used over the years and how you can mix and match these to create some really interesting effects. The first off is the Bureau of Balance bracer that I made for Carey Fang Battle. So this is made using foam cutouts and then split pins for the metal studs, and then I've used the scoring technique. So the smaller ones I've just used clay tools to carve into it, and the bigger pieces I actually used a soldering iron just to take chunks out. So see, all the pieces combined and you get something like that. Next one is Loki's headpiece. So the detailing on this is rolled Worbla, and then on the back, excuse the mess, it's my first piece, I've used D-rings and elastic to hold it onto my head. And next is Toriel's horns. So these are upholstery foam, and then the raised effect was done with pipe cleaners. So you can just use whatever you've got to hand, really. These are the second version of Rogue's cuffs that I've made. So the first one, actually, I didn't leave enough room to get my hands in, so every time I opened it, it just ended up splitting the Worbla. So you do have to be a bit careful. Whilst it's flexible, it's not overly flexible. So with this, to compensate, I sort of added a buckle in. So it's I've used contact glue to stick it to the foam, and then sort of warbled over it just to keep it in place, and then I can just buckle it up. And you're not limited to just armour and accessories either. I've actually used Worbla in all my beasts in some way or another. So I've got the Niffler, his face, his hands, and his little feeties, all made from Worbla, and then I've just put the eyes through whilst it was still warm, and then attached it at the back as well. The Doxy, for example, is all Worbla. And a little bit battered after his trip to Florida, we've got Pickett, who hangs out in Newt's pocket, and I just warbled a safety pin into the back just to secure him on so I don't lose him, but I think I'm going to have to remake the poor lad.